The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today we're doing part 3 of 3, the trilogy about Pete and Luz's unlikely afterlife friends. In the episode, the 2 episodes previous, in the first of those, I mentioned or told the story of Pete and Luz. If you recall, Luz is a young woman who suffered with manic depressive bipolar illness. She was alone at her home of an evening when she went into the manic phase. Her whole body just felt so full of energy that was manic energy, but nevertheless, she just felt that her whole body was pulsing with energy and she couldn't sit still. So she grabbed the car keys and got in the car and she just drove like mad. She ran into another car and killed herself and the only occupant of the other car, Pete. In the dream that brought this in the direction of me and my prayer partners, I saw the collision. There were 2 mangled cars, and a man simply kind of stood up and walked out of the mess. Because it involved 2 different cars, I wondered, who is this guy? And it turned out that the person that we were helping was really more Luz, the driver. Her name is Luz, isn't light. She was the one who had some stuckness, some issue around her sudden and traumatic death, even though he died traumatically as well. Pete showed me in the dream, or they showed me together, that he just kind of walked out of it and got on with what's next. As it turned out, um, what we learned when we went into the story and got to talk with Luz, she she was, of course, apologetic or sorry that she had caused this accident that killed this man, but she said something like, "I got so lucky that he was the one I ran into because he's such a wonderful person." Well, they both died at about the same time. They both died at the scene. Each of their guardians tended to them, but Pete's guardian assured him or made sure that he was aware that you have just died in an automobile accident that was caused by the other driver. You're safe. I have you. He inquired about the other driver and learned that from his guardian that, well, she was a young woman who was in a manic episode, that she had a mental illness that impaired her judgment, and she made a poor decision that led to the accident that caused the deaths of both of you. Well, when Pete learned that the other person had also died, this is his reaction, or I want to say his response. I don't know that he was reactive as much as proactive. I'm going to go into that. He said, we both died instantly, dramatically in the same accident. Whatever it is that we do next, what if we do it together? Wow. I can feel Pete's presence right now. I've done like 600 of these over the last 28 years, and this one just stands out as extraordinary in that it just shows a sense of what I call unitive consciousness, that whatever happens to me always happens in a context that involves all that is, all that's around me. And he didn't just curl up in his own pain or anger or any of the other reactions that he might have had to being suddenly killed on the road by the actions of another driver who was driving in an unsafe way. Once he learned that she was impaired because of a mental concern issue, he just said, could we do this together? I want to be like that. I'd like to move quickly past any bad things that befall me or any faults of others that somehow harm me. I would like to be more like Pete. And that's the way I'm going to approach this particular podcast because this third part of a trilogy, we first tell the story, then we have what we call compassionate response in the second one, and the third one, spiritual practice. So today, will be the spiritual practice one. Many times in the spiritual practice part of a trilogy, I recommend some prayer practice because I believe a lot of you who pay attention to this podcast have something that you might call prayer or meditation, something that you do on a daily or frequent basis that helps you center yourself and be at your best. I certainly do. Today, I'm not going to go into any one practice so much as I want to talk more broadly about the way that I would like to become more like Pete. And perhaps you're like me. We're not starting at ground zero. We have empathy for other people, and we're not always just about our own troubles and sorrows and even our own traumas. Uh, But I'd like to go a little bit more global in how I approach this, and you can, you know, do with it what you will. Maybe there'll be something in here that you'll find helpful. One of the things that Pete did almost instinctually, or at least rapidly, was move from the idea of the separate self, the distinct individual moving through a world full of lots of other things, and think of himself as part of an event that included others right away. He didn't personalize this in an individualistic way and say, I have just been killed by somebody who was driving recklessly, which is something that he easily could have done because it's true. Instead, he thought of himself as being a part of a constellation of events and at least another person affected by the same thing, and he wanted to approach next steps with that in mind. I'm going to distinguish between the words reactive and proactive. He could have just reacted. Reaction, I think, in my life at least, often happens nearly instantaneously and almost without conscious thought. Reacting to a thing is very often uh, in the moment, instantaneous, with little or no opportunity to consider options. Uh, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? That's isn't that largely the definition of being reactive? And sometimes being reactive is valuable and beneficial. Uh, it means that you can be in the moment, and if it's called for, suddenly um, act in a way that sudden circumstances have placed before you, and you don't delay. You immediately react. First responders are good at what they do because they can react when the alarm goes off or when a sudden call comes in or whatever. I'm reactive when I am awakened in the night. I had a dream last night, one of these contact dreams, and even though I might be tempted to roll over and go back to sleep or whatever, I try to make myself react right now and put the light on the nightstand and write this dream down. Reactivity isn't necessarily a bad thing, but one thing that reactivity lacks is deliberation time, pausing to consider among a number of different options and mull over or maybe pray about or whatever a decision such that you might come to the best possible decision in the circumstance. But on the other hand, do you really want your ambulance driver or the fire department to be pondering how they're going to respond to the 911 call? No, you really pretty much want reactivity, but you want professional reactivity that where people have been through training that where the reactive action has been preceded by deliberation and training about what's best to be done in the moment quickly. I don't know if it really fits Pete if he needed to be that reactive because he did describe his guardian getting him out of body, talking to him and assuring him that yes, indeed, you did just die. You're out of body, but you're with me. This is why it happened. This is how it happened. So there was a process of at least being informed about the circumstance that he was in. But it sounded to me like there wasn't a great deal of time spent on deciding what to do next. And in fact, Pete was the one who proposed the idea, what if this woman who caused the accident and I move through this next phase together? To me, that sounds like proactivity. Pro often means to be in favor of or before a next thing. And he was both of those. He was in favor of uh, at least proposing to his guardian that he and the person who caused the accident, Luz, do this together. And he presumed that there would be a sequence of events that would come next that would be orderly and that they would be instructed about or led through. One thing that you might do that I've been considering as I got ready to do this podcast is in prayer, could I pray for a deepened gift of reactivity that the next time that an event comes up that challenges me deeply, that I have a kind of a well to draw on, and that I can stay calm in the moment, and that my actions won't just be out of my control. If I have to react to a thing, does that mean I do so blindly and carelessly just because something happened and I needed to respond to it? You can pray in advance. I was taught that as a child. My one of my aunts both my aunts were Dominican nuns, and they both taught the first grade. And they, and I think others around me, perhaps my parents and school teachers, but I know one of my aunts taught me to pray for a rainy day. That meant anticipate that one of these days there's going to be a difficult life circumstance, a rainy day, something that will challenge you. Pray in advance that when that day arrives, you'll have uh, peacefulness and calm and the ability to be at the top of your game in terms of making decisions and choices. Pray for a rainy day so that it doesn't just catch you off guard without an umbrella. Just pray in advance for uh, the next time something really challenging comes your way. If you have a prayer practice, uh, does that make sense to you? In whatever it is, your cosmology is how you understand the universe, God, if you believe in God, as I do, can you ask your higher power, for example, for a grace? When I was a child, I thought of it as kind of like a bank account where you save something that you're not going to need right now, but you want it to be available later. Uh, Maybe that's a little too mechanical or transactional for your taste, but I'm 69 now and I still do that. I just go to the Lord and say, here, I want to bank this. Would you help me be at my best and be calm and deliberative and be able to be of service the next time some crisis emerges, that I might be cool-headed and serve you well and serve other people well. So you could kind of pray in advance. Um, that's a way of being proactive about a circumstance that hasn't even come up yet. I think that can be helpful. I wonder what Pete did to get the way he was. We don't know anything about his career, family life, where he was going as he was driving that day. Uh, he didn't look back right away. He stayed in the present moment and he looked forward. That doesn't mean that he didn't later mourn the loss of whatever his network was and what his vocation was, what he was doing. But he didn't go to that immediately. He stayed in the present moment and anticipated the next moment uh, and made that job one. And then later, even after dealing with us, I think was going to circle back to perhaps grieving what was left behind and maybe being concerned for people who were grieving him because of his sudden death. So to be proactive, to be in favor of and before acting, um, I've needed that skill for most of my life because in one way or another, I think since high school, I've been a leader. Leading presumes being in front of. If you're going to lead a hike, which you won't catch me doing, but if I were going to go on a hike, and I were to lead people, I wouldn't stay at the back or even in the middle. I'd go to the front and say, "Here, come this way." Uh, I've been a leader most of my life, and that involves anticipation and planning. And anticipation and planning really, to me, means to look over the whole story arc of what you're going to do and why it would be enjoyable and how we should go about it. Um, and the more people that are involved in whatever it is, the activity, the issue you're planning, the more complex it might become, and the more facets there are to how you might have all of these things organized in a way that creates something that seemed like it didn't need to be organized. One of the signs of something that's really well organized is that it looks like it happens spontaneously with little effort. That's because the effort was behind the scenes or ahead of time. Well, how can how can you and I become more at peace in the moment, appropriately reactive and appropriately proactive about what's now and what's next, the way that Pete was? I just admire him so much. One of the things that I've been pondering as I've been praying with this story for several weeks now is I believe that the way that I would like to become more like what I think Pete was is by paying attention to the fact that my ego wants to have me separate from everything else and think that I am my intelligence or my consciousness is the axis around which the universe revolves. That I am this center of consciousness, and everything that comes my way somehow must move through me. Or I could think of myself as embedded in a network in which there is a me that's distinct from other things, but that's a secondary uh, reality. The reality is I'm first of all enmeshed in all that is. I'm going to try to repeat that. Can you think of yourself as primarily embedded in an ecosystem of love where everything around you has its place and you have a place in it? And then secondarily, you're an individual actor in this environment, acting upon it in ways that might affect some change for the good. I think of it sometimes. This is a phrase that I use quite a lot in giving talks. I'm a citizen of the United States of America, and our national celebration is on July the 4th, and we call it Independence Day. In our idea of citizenship, independence is a very exalted virtue. But if I think it would be a great thing if we ever decided to make July 5th or July 3rd, either side, Interdependence Day, because we never are radically independent from the moment we get here. We're always dependent upon other people to supply something for us. I'm coming to you over the internet, over a Zoom call. I don't have any idea how the internet works. Uh, Other people had to design it and maintain it, and all I do is use it. I'm interdependent always. So that's important to me. My sense of higher power is personal. I believe in the God that is revealed through the Jewish and Christian traditions, and including the Catholic Christian tradition. I believe that my higher power is personal, and I have a personality because I'm created from a creator who has a personality. I believe that I'm created out of love for love. I believe my main mission is to receive love first. In fact, I think I'm swimming in it. If God is love and God is everywhere, then love is all around me always. Even if I'm feeling lonely or sad or whatever, I'm doing that in a sea of love. That's important to me. Otherwise, my ego can just run off in its own direction and feel like it's all alone in the universe and nobody loves me and all this other nonsense. I'm on the campus of a university. I'm living. I can look out my window over this camera on my laptop and I can see university buildings. I live on the campus of the University of Arizona. A university starts with uni, one, uh, because its mission is to try to explore, understand, and teach about the oneness, the everything. And a large university has many departments because there are so many things in a universe like ours to learn about. St. Thomas Aquinas, in whom I'm trained, taught that because the universe is so vast and because our brain and intellect is smaller, we're working with a tool that's insufficient to the task in an absolute sense. We can't use this brain and this mind to understand everything all at once, which doesn't mean we don't try. We do. But Aquinas taught that the way that we do that is by division. Think of the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, or that old thing about how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You take the large task and you break it down into reasonable parts. We do that all the time. You do that when you get out of bed in the morning and plan the day. You can't do everything. And in fact, today I have lots of things that I'd like to accomplish today, and they're they're way more than I'll have time for. So I have to apportion my time and be satisfied with small victories, whatever you can accomplish, and leave the rest of it for another time. But a university and a universe, Aquinas taught that if you want to study geology, for example, you set aside musical theater uh, or I don't know, optics. We have a big optics department here and space telescopes and all of that. If you want to study geology, you need to focus on that. And when you come to a university, you don't even get on campus before people are asking you, what's your major? That is, what subset of the totality of everything that could be studied here are you going to focus on? Well, Aquinas taught that it's valuable uh, to uh, divide and decide what we're going to focus our academic study on, but we must remember that we've done it. Remember that whatever you're studying is a part of the whole and not the whole. A good student, uh, a disciple, the Greek word for student is disciple, has to be disciplined. And part of the discipline of being good at your area of study is being able to focus on it and have some sort of academic rigor to study the thing. But it's also important not to become egg-headed, unless you want to be egg-headed, I suppose, but I don't. Uh, the fact that I'm trying to gain an expertise in one field doesn't mean I want to be ignorant about everything around me. And the fact that I'm becoming an expert in geology doesn't mean that I don't want to be able to have a conversation with someone in the theater department. I might want to at least pay attention to things that are available to me that I can learn about other things around me that are not my area of specialization so that I can be a part of the whole and not just be this solitary little unit. Well, uh, somehow I think getting back to Pete, uh, he had a sense of the whole, even at a moment when he could easily have just isolated in the traumatic event that led to his death not very uh, much earlier. I try to do that. I try to, in my own prayer practice and my own meditation, some of the times I do that with my eyes open because uh, closing one's eyes in meditation is very good on focus, on interior thoughts and something that you're trying to delve into. But it can also be good to look up and around. Uh, I'm looking just past the camera, and it's a sunny day in Tucson. It's going to be in the mid and high 70s. It's gorgeous. I can see light and shade, plants and flowers, and a blue sky. it's good to remind myself with whatever's going on in my own life that I'm in this context that's way larger, that's shared with other people. And having a meditative practice that can both go interior and deep and into one's own soul and converse with one's own higher power, that can be really beautiful. But my higher power is also outside, uh, feeding that plant over there and providing um, sunshine. And there were hummingbirds out there a little while ago because it's springtime, and they're sucking out the nectar of the flowers. I'm sure I'm going on too much, but uh, part, I think, of uh, what enabled Pete to be as gracious as he was in that moment was having that sense of wholeness of the universe around him and not just the particular uh, tragedy that had just befallen him. That can be cultivated in prayer. Yeah, just the mulling over, how do I believe that I'm here because I'm intended? This is kind of going into my own Catholic Christian cosmology, but I believe that God is love. God is the one who created all, that everything that is redolent, is dripping with the stuff of God, the presence of God, that I can know God from everything God created. I'm in a sea of love even on a bad day. Um, and by the way, in this context that has to do with sudden death, I know that I'm mortal. I could die a sudden death. I don't know how my death will come. If it were to come suddenly, I would like to go through it the way Pete went through his and be able to say, oh, I can take in new information, and the new information is I just died suddenly in a car crash. And then be able to have my wits about me to say, is everyone else okay? Or how can I help? Uh, can I take direction, which Pete was able to do? He was able to ask intelligent questions. He didn't presume an expertise in a land that was new to him. He availed himself of the help of his guardian. He asked intelligent questions. He got assistance. He also was able to choose what ought be done first, and what ought be done later. All of those things. I thought of Pete being an example, an exemplar. Not a word that we use all that often, an exemplar. Sometimes we might use a synonym like hero, model, but somehow exemplar came to mind for me. And so I looked it up. It has to do with the idea of a copy or a pattern. Well, when I was a brand new college student, I introduced myself as an art major because I was the guy in high school that did the posters if you ran for office, and I made those big banners the football team ran through at the beginning of the game. I was kind of a copyist, really, not so much. Well, I don't know. I could also create ideas and use media to get them onto the page, um, to draw and paint. But later on, I ended up, especially in my ministry and my priesthood, of doing a lot of church art. And very often, I would create something that needed to be repeated. I needed four of them or eight of them, or if it were something like that was going to be invitations or something, there might be 100 of them. I would make a pattern. Uh, and once I was satisfied that I had the idea that moved from my mind onto the page was what I wanted it to be, then the most of the time was spent on creating the pattern. Once the pattern is set, um, uh, making four or eight or 100 of the same thing is easier than creating the pattern. Perhaps you've experienced something like that. In order for me to try to be more like Pete, I need to put the work in on the pattern. Again, Aquinas talked about if you want to have a virtue, first create the habit that moves you toward it. Create the habit that moves you toward it. Don't just say, oh, the power is vested in me. I'm going to henceforth be this. That's what people do on New Year's Day, or Catholics sometimes do on Ash Wednesday. We decide we're going to make some big self-improvement and we're going to do it this way. Um, and then days later, we're finding that we're falling short of the goal. We can move toward uh, a goal, toward a virtue by practicing habits that take us there. So if you want to be more like Pete and just go through a trauma that ended your bodily life and find that the your impulse is to ask, is everybody else okay? And is there something I can do to help? And then to say of the person who caused his death, I wonder if she'd like to go with me. I wonder if I can help her or we can help each other. Could we do this together? To me, that shows a really rich, well-developed virtue in Pete. And I'd like to be more like that. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope it hasn't been too abstract because I feel like I went a little more in that direction than I often do. Nevertheless, it is what it is. So if you would like to be in touch with me, here's how you do that. My website is nathan-castle.com. There's a contact form on there. I always like it if you fill it out completely with a a phone number and an indication of the time zone that you live in so that if I were to text you, I'm not doing that at an inappropriate hour. I ask that if you have a question for me that pertains to the kind of the work that my prayer partners and I do, if you haven't read one of the Afterlife Interrupted books, please do that first so that if we do have a conversation or some interaction, it will be more rich because you'll be better informed. Remember that if you listen to or watch this podcast, I pray for you regularly. When I do, my favorite way of doing that is asking the Holy Spirit, which means breath, who can see inside you and knows you through and loves you, that if the Holy Spirit can see a place in you that might be ripe and receptive to healing, even if it's a hurt that happened long ago, wherever it is where there's an opportunity for like a new bud, like on a plant, where the plant can feed a place that it wants to flower and bloom. That's what I do for you. I pray for the Holy Spirit to work deep within you to bring you to a place of abundance and peace. So that's it for this episode. I hope you'll join us next time for the Joyful Friar podcast. God bless you. Bye now.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.